She was forced into an arranged marriage with a millionaire, but it turned into a heartwarming love. November rain fell quietly over London's old streets, casting a misty veil over time-worn windows. In the spacious office of a law firm in Mayfair, Eleanor Ward sat silently on a deep brown leather chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Across from her, a polished walnut desk reflected the stern face of the elderly solicitor, arranging a thick stack of documents. The scent of old paper mingled with a faint trace of Earl Grey tea in the air, bringing back memories of her foster father, Jonathan Ward, the only man who had ever loved and protected her unconditionally. He had taken her in when she was just 10, after her birth mother left to pursue a life abroad. Jonathan had been a father, a teacher, and a steadfast anchor in her life. Now at 21, Elena faced loss once again. Jonathan's death left not only a void in her heart, but also a harsh reality. Her future was now bound to the cold, legal lines of his will. Miss Ward, the solicitor's voice was low and deliberate, as if stretching out each word. Mr. Jonathan has left very specific instructions. The entire shareholding of Ward Media Group, along with the Chelsea house and the financial trust set aside for you, will only be yours if you marry before your 22nd birthday. Elena's brow furrowed, her tone steady. Marry? Yes, he nodded. Your husband must be a man of good reputation, ideally from the fields of law or publishing. The words cut through her cherished freedom like a blade. Jonathan, the man who had taught her that women must be independent, that happiness should never be dependent on another, had now left a condition binding her to marriage. Elena, the solicitor continued, Mr. Jonathan has also appointed your legal guardian, the man who will oversee this condition. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Who? The solicitor opened the folder and took out a sheet of paper. Gabriel Hawthorne, London's leading criminal defense lawyer. He was Jonathan's close friend for over 20 years. The name was not unfamiliar. The press called Gabriel the Man of Steel, cold, resolute, untouchable. He appeared in high-profile trials, always unshaken under pressure, never losing a significant case. When will I meet him? Elena asked flatly. Tomorrow, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, at Mr. Hawthorne's residence in Chelsea. And what if I don't get married? She asked, even though she already knew the answer. You will lose everything. The house will be sold. The tuition money will go to charity. You will only keep your personal belongings. Leaving the law office, Elena stepped into the damp London rain. Streetlights cast a golden glow on the wet pavement, reflecting the silhouette of a young woman in a fitted beige trench coat. In her hand, the business card bearing Gabriel Hawthorne's address felt as heavy as a challenge. That night, in the house that might soon no longer be hers, Eleanor Ward stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of man Gabriel Hawthorne was. Would he agree to become a solution to a problem neither of them had ever chosen? The next day, precisely at 5, Eleanor stood before the tall black iron gate of number 18 Weatherby Gardens. The Victorian house, with its white window frames and climbing roses, somehow radiated the cold formality of its owner. An elderly woman with neatly pinned silver hair opened the door. Miss Ward, I'm Mrs. Doyle, Mr. Hawthorne's housekeeper. Please come in. He's waiting in the library. Walking through a marble-floored hallway, Eleanor felt the silence wrap around her like a cloak. The library unfolded before her, towering dark wood shelves reaching the ceiling, filled with the scent of aged timber and printed pages. Gabriel Hawthorne stood by the window, the fading light casting over his impeccably tailored navy suit. He turned, his steel-gray eyes sharp yet unreadable, assessing her from head to toe. Miss Ward, he gave a slight nod. His voice was deep, precise, as though delivering a statement in court. Mr. Hawthorne, she replied, her back straight. Their eyes met for a few long seconds that felt like minutes. Between these two strangers, an invisible thread had been tied, bound by duty, by the clauses of a will, and by a future neither of them had chosen. Please sit, he gestured toward the chair opposite him. Elena sat down gracefully, her hands resting lightly on her lap. Gabriel remained standing for a few seconds longer, as if to maintain the upper hand, then finally sat down behind the desk. I assume your grandfather's will caught you by surprise, just as it did me, being appointed as the guardian. Sonnen, you knew my father? Elena asked, hoping to find a trace of humanity in this cold room. Jonathan Ward was my mentor when I first entered the legal field 20 years ago, a man of unshakable principles and exceptional intellect. For the first time, Gabriel's voice softened slightly. He thought highly of you, Elena said, her throat tightening. Gabriel looked at her more intently, as if her words had just opened a crack in the thick ice around him. He left me a letter, he said, taking an envelope from the desk. In it, he explains the reason behind the terms. And what is the reason? Elena asked, her voice holding a hint of challenge. Gabriel read in silence for a moment before speaking. He knew you would refuse to depend on any man. He also knew I wouldn't exploit the situation. He believed we are two wounded souls who could heal each other. Elena's cheeks flushed. My father was always a romantic. And still, Gabriel folded the letter carefully. The terms are legal and binding. If you don't marry, you will lose everything. And what about you? Elena looked him straight in the eye. What do you gain from this? Gabriel was silent for a long moment before answering. The chance to keep a promise to a man who believed in me when no one else did. Elena leaned forward slightly, her gaze sharp as a blade. That's not the whole truth, is it, sir? For the first time, Gabriel Hawthorne was truly caught off guard. This 20-year-old girl had just challenged him in a way no seasoned lawyer ever dared in all these years. It's the only truth that matters, he replied, but Elena had already seen the flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. Then, she stood resolute. It seems we both have our secrets, sir. The question is, are you willing to marry a stranger to keep a promise? Gabriel studied her closely. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Finally, he stood up. Yes, he said, but you must understand. This will be a marriage of duty, nothing more. Elena felt something strange stir in her chest, relief, and a feeling she didn't dare name. Agreed, she replied, but both of them knew nothing between them would be as simple as the words they had just spoken. The ceremony took place in a small meeting room at the Kensington Town Hall. No flowers, no music, no guests except Mrs. Doyle and the solicitor who had read the will. Elena wore a navy dress left by her late foster mother, while Gabriel kept his usual navy suit, as if this were merely another appointment on his calendar. Mr. Gabriel Hawthorne, do you take... The registrar read in an even tone. I do, Gabriel replied without hesitation, his eyes fixed on the glass window behind her. Miss Elena Ward, do you take... I do, she answered, her voice so soft only those nearby could hear. They exchanged 2 plain gold bands which Gabriel had bought that very morning without asking her opinion. When he slid the ring onto her finger, their fingertips brushed lightly. A faint spark passed through, making her glance up at him, but his eyes had already turned away. It's raining outside, Mrs. Doyle remarked as the three of them stepped out of the town hall. Raindrops rolled down the car windows, reflecting the silvery gray light of a late London winter. During the drive back to the Chelsea house, neither of them spoke. The soft patter of rain on the car roof was the only sound. Elena stared out the window, watching the streets and old rooftops slide past, realizing she had just stepped into a life nothing like the one she had dreamed of. The house was as silent as the first time she had entered it. Mrs. Doyle had prepared a bottle of champagne and a few small tarts on the dining table, calling it a little celebration. But no one opened the bottle and no one touched the food. Gabriel gave her a short nod before disappearing into the library. Elena, your room is on the 2nd floor at the end of the hallway, Mrs. Doyle said gently, though there was a hint of sympathy in her eyes. The bedroom was spacious, with cream-colored walls and a large window overlooking the back garden, where winter roses still struggled to bloom beneath the mist. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, slipped the gold band off her finger, and placed it on the dressing table. Its cold gleam reflected in the mirror, alongside the face of a bride who had just stepped into a marriage her heart had never been ready for. The first days after the wedding passed in suffocating silence. The Chelsea house ran like a machine, precise to the second. 7 a.m., breakfast. 1 p.m., lunch. 8 and 8 p.m., dinner, never early, never late. Gabriel appeared at the dining table on time, exchanged a few polite remarks about the weather or the news, then disappeared into the library or his home office. Elena quickly realized that, apart from Mrs. Doyle and a few part-time staff, there was no one else in the house. Mrs. Doyle, with her gentle voice and seasoned eyes, was the only thread of warmth. One morning, as she handed Elena a cup of coffee, she smiled faintly. The master values order. From his desk to the garden, everything must be in its place. Tidiness keeps the mind clear. He always says that. Elena stepped into the library for the first time on a rainy afternoon. The room was vast, with high ceilings and dark wood shelves stretching to the top, a sliding ladder running along them. Most of the books were about law, but near the window she unexpectedly found a row of poetry volumes, Byron, Keats, and even collections by Sylvia Plath. "He likes poetry?" Elena asked when Mrs. Doyle entered with a tea tray. She glanced toward the door, as if afraid someone might hear, then answered softly, "He used to read aloud in the evenings, but it's been a long time since I've seen him do it." That afternoon, Elena sat at one end of the long table, laptop open as she worked on an assignment for her journalism class. The patter of rain outside the window helped her focus. Suddenly, she sensed someone standing at the doorway. Looking up, she saw Gabriel, holding a book, his expression unreadable. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said, his voice low and courteous. "It's fine," Elena replied, closing her laptop slightly but keeping a finger to mark the page. "This is your home." "It's yours too, Miss Ward," he corrected gently, though there was something unfamiliar in the way he said it. They looked at each other for a few seconds. For the first time, Elena saw not just the usual coldness, but something deeper, as if he were observing not only what she did, but why she did it. "Journalism assignment?" Gabriel glanced toward her laptop screen. "Yes, on freedom of speech and investigative reporting." A faint glimmer touched his eyes. A courageous topic. Elena was slightly surprised by the remark. "And you prefer?" Gabriel was silent for a few moments, then placed the book on the table. The cover read, "Poems of the English Romantics." "I used to think justice was the highest goal," he said slowly. "Now I know that sometimes law and justice are not the same." Their eyes met, and Elena realized this was the first time he had shared something personal without hiding behind rigid answers. The first event where they appeared together as husband and wife was the Judges Association Charity Gala, held at the Ritz Hotel, a place so grand and luxurious it was almost suffocating. Elena wore a long, elegant black dress chosen by Carmen, who insisted, "The wife of Judge Hawthorne cannot appear in public lacking the necessary refinement." The dress fit perfectly, flattering Elena's soft figure, now fully recovered after weeks of Gabriel's attentive care. For the first time since the wedding, Elena felt like she truly belonged to the world she now lived in, at least on the outside. Gabriel was waiting for her at the bottom of the staircase in a flawless black tuxedo. When he saw her descending, his eyes swept over her body like an electric current. Something sparkled in his gaze, fleeting, then vanished so quickly that Elena wasn't sure if she'd really seen it at all. "You look elegant," he said, extending his hand in a polite gesture. "Thank you," Elena replied, placing her hand on his. The moment they touched, she felt the steadiness in him. Not power, but presence. On the way to the gala, neither of them spoke, but Elena noticed that Gabriel occasionally glanced at her, as if trying to understand something he couldn't quite name. The ballroom was packed with powerful people. Gabriel was quickly surrounded by colleagues offering respectful greetings. Elena stood beside him, smiling softly, maintaining the proper demeanor. Each time he introduced her as, "My wife Elena," her heart fluttered slightly. "I didn't expect you to be married, Judge Hawthorne," an older judge said with a mischievous look in his eyes. "And to such a young and beautiful woman, it must be love at first sight." Elena felt Gabriel's body tense slightly, though his face remained composed. "Love doesn't concern itself with timelines," he replied, his voice more like he was quoting legal code than making a romantic statement. Throughout the dinner, Elena quietly observed Gabriel. He navigated conversations as if conducting a trial, speaking just enough, smiling at the right moments, but revealing nothing personal. A perfect performance. Everything remained smooth until the wife of a prosecutor, clearly drunk, turned to Elena with a saccharine smile. "It must be fascinating to be married to the coldest man in London's judiciary, huh? Tell me, dear, How do you keep a marriage warm when your husband is rumored to have ice running through his veins? The whole table went still. All eyes turned to Elena. Gabriel remained motionless, but Elena could feel a wave of tension radiating from him. Lifting her chin, Elena smiled gracefully. Her voice rang out clearly. On the contrary, I've found that truly strong men are the ones who know how to protect their warmth, not flaunt it for anyone. The air seemed to split in two. The woman blushed. A few people nearby nodded subtly in agreement. Elena felt Gabriel's hand under the table shift slightly, as if he wanted to take her hand, but stopped midway. After dinner, while walking out to retrieve their coats, Gabriel spoke in a low voice. You didn't have to defend me. Elena looked at him and replied calmly, I wasn't defending you. I was defending my husband. A simple sentence, but heavier than any speech. For the first time, Elena referred to herself as his wife, not out of obligation, but by choice. Gabriel paused briefly, then continued walking, silent, though his gaze lingered more on her. In the car on the way home, the air between them felt different. Gabriel drove slower than usual, occasionally glancing at Elena. When they reached the villa, in the hallway before they went their separate ways, Gabriel stopped. Elena, he said. The second time he'd called her by name, this time more gently, like a confession. Thank you for tonight. She nodded, her heart beating softly in her chest. Good night, Gabriel. He froze for a moment, as if hearing his name from her lips was something sacred. Then he gave a small nod and turned away. But Elena knew. Tonight, they had crossed an invisible line, and there was no going back. The change began on a winter morning when Elena woke with a pounding headache and a burning throat. She was about to go to the kitchen for a cup of ginger tea when Mrs. Doyle appeared at her door with a tray of hot tea. The master told me to inform him if you're unwell, she said, setting the tray down. But I suspect he'll know soon enough. Elena hadn't yet asked what she meant when a knock sounded. Gabriel stepped in, not in his usual suit, but in a white shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, tie gone. You have a fever, he said immediately, pressing the back of his hand to her forehead. His voice was still low, but softer somehow. It's just a little... No arguments. He turned to Mrs. Doyle. Warm water and towels. I'll handle the rest. All morning he came and went from her room, bringing tea, checking her temperature, opening the window for fresh air, then drawing the curtains again when the draft grew too cold. He never stayed long each time, but his steady presence made the room feel less empty. That evening, when Elena woke from a fevered haze, she found herself being supported by strong yet gentle arms. Just water, Gabriel murmured, holding the cup for her to sip slowly. When she tried to thank him, he simply shook his head. Sleep. A few weeks later, Elena faced a major deadline. She skipped breakfast and lunch, relying only on coffee to stay awake. The result, halfway through class at the journalism school, her vision blurred and the world went black. When she woke, she was in the infirmary, and the man sitting beside her was Gabriel. This time it's low blood sugar, he said, his tone stern but unable to mask his concern. You can't keep skipping meals like this. How are you here? You listed me as your emergency contact. He looked her straight in the eye. Why? Elena hesitated for a moment, then answered honestly, because I knew you'd come. In that instant, Gabriel's gaze shifted, as if her words had pierced the armor he wore around himself. Another evening, while Elena was reading in the library, Gabriel appeared at the doorway with 2 cups of tea. Coffee this late will keep you awake, he explained, setting 1 cup before her. She looked up, catching the slight tilt of his gaze. No longer the cold assessment she was used to, but something warmer, cautious yet real. Are you always like this? She asked, caring but pretending not to. The corner of Gabriel's mouth curved faintly. Perhaps. And in the golden lamplight of the room, for the first time, Elena felt that the wall of ice between them was no longer whole. That night, Elena woke up at midnight with a burning thirst. As she reached for her glass of water, she noticed a chair beside the bed slightly out of place. On the nightstand was a fresh, cool glass of water, and another short handwritten note. If you need anything, just call. G.H. For the first time since the wedding, Elena fell asleep again with a smile on her lips. Not because of grand words, but because someone had quietly cared for her in the dark. Not out of duty, but for something far deeper. The storm came without warning that night. Wind lashing against the library windows, rain pounding in relentless sheets. Elena was reading when a thunderclap shook the house. The lights flickered, then went out completely. The only light left came from the fireplace and flashes of lightning tearing across the sky. She was about to look for candles when Gabriel appeared in the doorway, his dark shirt damp from the rain, droplets tracing the line of his jaw. He stepped inside, closed the door, but said nothing at first. "Elena," his voice was lower and rougher than usual. "We need to talk." She perched on the edge of the table, waiting. The firelight carved shadows across his face, revealing both weariness and tension. "You think I'm cold, detached," he began. "But the truth is, I learned to lock everything away. When I was a boy, I had to watch my mother walk away without a backward glance. Since then, I understood that love meant loss." Elena stayed silent, her eyes fixed on him. "I chose my work because in it, the law was the one thing I could rely on. But then," he hesitated, meeting her gaze, "then you appeared and broke every rule I'd built for myself." Outside, the wind howled harder, pressing against each word. "You scare me," Gabriel went on, his voice dropping. "I'm afraid that wanting someone so much, losing them would break me beyond repair. Afraid that if I let myself love, I'd lose the last shred of control I have." Elena stepped closer until there was barely a breath between them. "So, you're going to let that fear decide your whole life?" He gave a small, bitter smile. "I don't know. I just know. I've tried not to think about you, but the harder I try, the more I realize I don't want a single day to pass without seeing you." In that moment, she cupped his face, feeling the warmth of his skin despite the rain still clinging to his clothes. "Gabriel, love isn't weakness. It's choosing the right person to give your strength to." A crack of thunder, a flash of lightning, and his lips found hers. The kiss wasn't rushed, but deep and fervent, as if he had been waiting for it far too long. That night, the rain still poured outside, but in the warm room, two once distant souls found each other. Not through duty, but through a bond stronger than any legal clause. That night, after the kiss under the lightning's flash, everything unfolded like an unstoppable current. Gabriel quietly led her to her room, his warm hand enclosing hers, every movement deliberate, as if he wanted to etch each moment into memory. The sound of rain on the roof merged with their heartbeats. No more distance, no more icy facade. Just two people finding each other through a trust that had only just begun. Kiss after kiss, whispers blending with the wind outside. That night, Elena felt the walls Gabriel had built around himself crumble. He was so gentle that her heart felt utterly safe, and in his arms, she believed this was the beginning of something lasting. But morning told a different story. When Elena woke, pale sunlight seeped through the curtains into an empty, cold space beside her. She found Gabriel in the library, already in a perfectly tailored suit, as if the night before had never happened. Standing before the shelves, his back to her, his voice was firm. "Last night was a mistake." Elena froze. "A mistake? We have a clear arrangement. I shouldn't have broken it." "And you think I regret it?" She stepped closer, her gaze locking onto his. "You want to pull away out of fear, but don't drag me into that fear." Gabriel stayed silent, his shoulders rigid as stone. In his eyes, she caught a fleeting glimpse of something, not coldness, but a fierce inner struggle. Yet he turned away before she could hold on to it. She left the library, her heart heavy. The wall between them, which she thought had fallen the night before, was back, taller and thicker than ever. 2 weeks after that cold morning, Elena avoided Gabriel as much as possible. She buried herself in classes, articles for the student paper, and sometimes stayed out late just to skip dinner with him. One Saturday night, she left a cafe after meeting with the editorial team. The small street was nearly empty, winter wind cutting sharp against her skin. Passing a narrow alley, she heard footsteps behind her. Before she could turn, a rough hand clamped over her mouth, dragging her into the shadows. The stench of alcohol and heavy breath closed in. She struggled, kicked hard, but the hoarse whisper in her ear froze her blood. "Stay quiet, or you'll regret it." Then a shout rang out, sharp and commanding. "Let her go!" The attacker was yanked backward, slammed against the wall. Elena stumbled, caught by strong, steady arms. Looking up, she saw Gabriel, his steel-gray eyes blazing with anger and fear. He pulled her close, checking every scrape on her hands, then wrapped her in an embrace so tight it was as if letting go meant losing her forever. "Are you hurt anywhere else?" His voice trembled slightly, but not from the cold. Police arrived. The attacker was taken away. On the silent ride home, Gabriel's hand never left hers. When the door closed behind them, he turned, his gaze intent as if to etch her image into memory. "Elena, I've had someone watching over you for a while, but tonight, I was only in time by sheer luck." She froze. "You have been watching me?" "Not watching, protecting," he corrected, stepping closer. "I kept my distance because I thought it was safer for you. But when I saw you almost torn away from me," he paused, his voice tightening, "I realized I can't live a single day not knowing where you are, not knowing you're safe." In his eyes, there was no longer a wall of steel, but bare, unshielded fear. Elena stepped forward, placing her hand over his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. "Then don't push me away again," she said softly. Gabriel nodded slightly, then pulled her into his arms. This time, the embrace wasn't out of duty. It was because he had truly chosen to stay. A year later, Elena stood on the graduation stage, receiving her journalism degree amid roaring applause. From the audience, Gabriel watched, his pride entirely unhidden. That evening, he brought her home earlier than usual. "I want to show you something," he said, leading her into the back garden. The May full moon cast a silver glow over blooming rose bushes. In the center of the garden, a small wooden table held 2 glasses of champagne. Elena was about to ask when Gabriel turned back, holding a blue velvet box. "Elena Ward," he began, his voice deep yet warm. "A year ago, we married because of a will. But tonight, I'm asking you this, not for paperwork, not for duty, but because I love you." He opened the box, revealing a simple yet exquisite diamond ring. "Will you marry me? This time, only for the heart?" Elena felt her eyes burn with tears. "Gabriel Hawthorne," she whispered with a soft laugh through them. "This time, it's for the heart." She offered her hand, and as the ring slid onto her finger, Gabriel pulled her into his arms. Their kiss beneath the moonlight was long and deep, a vow that needed no legal seal. The months that followed were filled with quiet joys and new beginnings. Seasons turned, and love grew stronger in the everyday moments they shared. 3 years passed. On an early autumn morning, soft golden sunlight spread across the back garden of the Hawthorne estate. The rustle of falling leaves mingled with the sound of a child's laughter from the porch. Elena sat on a bench, a warm cup of tea in her hands, her eyes following a dark-haired boy running around the rose bushes. Gabriel stood nearby, scooping up their son and spinning him around until the boy's laughter rang bright. When his gaze met Elena's, no words were needed. Between them, every distance that had once existed was long gone, replaced by a bond unbreakable. Setting her cup down, Elena walked over, wrapping her arms around Gabriel and their child. "I once thought," she said softly, "that a marriage born of duty could never bring happiness. But you proved me wrong." Gabriel smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Not duty, choice, and I'll choose you every day." Their child's laughter mingled with the autumn breeze, opening a new chapter, where love was no longer bound by clauses, but nurtured by the heart. From a marriage bound by the clauses of a will, Gabriel and Elena crossed every distance, fear and misunderstanding to find each other. They learned that true love doesn't come from arrangement, but from small moments, quiet acts of care, and the courage to stand together when the world turns away. The day they met, they were strangers, one living by rules and distance, the other craving freedom. But today they are family, each other's safe harbor. And perhaps, as they have come to realize, happiness is not about finding the right moment or circumstance. It's about choosing the right person and choosing them again every single day. If this story touched your heart, please like, share to spread the message of love, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story. See you in the next stories.